Hello my friends, Russell Wright from ThemeZoom.com and NetworkEmpire.com. And as part of the course on one feed to rule them all, understanding how to thread your ideas through your entire network, it's very important for me to begin to teach you how consciousness works at the level of the brain and beyond. And I'm going to introduce you as part of this course to one of my dear friends and mentors, Dr. Mark Evan Furman, whose work has profoundly influenced my life. I took a course called Escaping the Mind Prison, and it has helped me think about how to think when it comes to attention distraction. And the number one reason that most entrepreneurs fail is not understanding how their mind works. We're going to talk a little bit about why that's the case. First of all, Dr. Furman created the Neurophysics of Human Behavior. It's the textbook used in major universities and organizations that teach students cognitive neuroscience. And he has invented the standard theory of pattern entropy dynamics in cognitive neurophysics. Now, I just want to preface this by saying you don't have to understand the things that you are seeing in this at every level. Just get a feel for it, let it wash through you, so that you understand that the pinball machine of thought and emotion and how those two things work together are the same attention distraction that happens when you log into Facebook, when you log into LinkedIn, and you lose 5 hours and you wonder where you've been, and you don't know where it is, and you can't get that time back. I'm using Dr. Furman's work to help you become the master, because as David Bohm said, until thought is understood, better yet more than understood, perceived, it will actually control us, but it will create the impression that it is our servant, that it is doing what we want it to do. And this is really what confabulation is about, and we'll talk more about that. And marketing and also communicating products and services is very important for you to understand these principles. How can we study consciousness? This is again Mark's slideshow. If you can't see it, okay, and this is what he's saying, we've got to create neuroimagery. What determines our stream of consciousness? Okay, what determines our stream of consciousness? Can it be reliably predicted and influenced? What is the purpose of your conscious awareness? Can you expand and evolve the capabilities of your conscious awareness? If conscious awareness could see itself and thereby modify its own experience, in other words, if the eyeball could see itself, which it can't, would it evolve a greater degree of consciousness? Okay. Now, Dan Winter and I used to call this biofeedback in the work that we did, and the answer to this question is yes, because consciousness perceiving itself is called recursion, and there's a mathematics of recursion, which is consciousness itself. Okay. What does this have to do with social media and business, guys? Everything. It's about being distracted versus communicating new ideas. So, cognitive neurophysics, this is Mark's mastery. Thermodynamics, cybernetics, and network theory. Cognitive neuroscience and biophysics and self-organizing nonlinear dynamic systems. Okay, we include all of these in the development of our products, such as ThemeZoom and the rest. We include as much as we can within the understanding of the cognitive neurosciences and how to influence your own dynamic network, as well as organize and pay attention to what's important. So what is pattern entropy dynamics? It's a unified field theory. This is again a theory created by Mark Evan Furman. Very complex, honestly, so we're giving you a very superficial view. Entropy versus pattern. Behavior is neurocognitive systems attempt to counterbalance either excessive pattern or entropy. All right. And again, neuroscientists all around the world, both the spiritual and the non-spiritual type, have an understanding that consciousness is the hard problem to explain how a physical process in the brain gives rise to subjective experience. So what Dr. Furman has done is he's created a modeling structure of the function in the brain using a process called brain imaging, which is not a lot different than biofeedback. You can use ERP, EEG, and my favorite, fMRI, CAT, PET, and SQUID scans are all a part of understanding what's going on in the brain. Modeling structures and functions in subjective experience. How can you map subjective experience onto measurable processes in the brain? Well, that's kind of difficult. But Dr. Furman has created a system called mind imaging, which I've used, and it works. It's a way to connect emotions with logical heuristics, that is choice decision making. He calls it mind imaging. This is not a pitch for Dr. Furman's products. This is to help you understand, to think about how to think, and to let you know that there is a way to know what your patterns are. Okay, in my nonprofit organization called the Soul Line, we call this the pattern. And the pattern, you must include yourself in. That is part of the pattern. Dr. Furman talks about Neuro-print as a 10-stage systematic methodology for mind imaging. A Neuro-print of a subject's cognitive neurodynamic is developed by interview and observation of the subjective with the assistance of the following tools. He uses data collection form, a large sketch pad, colored pencils and markers, yay, artwork, and a stopwatch, and the basic 4-function calendar. And he uses those to determine where your hang-ups are. You can see this is much different than psychology. This is dealing with the actual physical states that create emotional blockages and resistance. Stage 1 is your degree of freedom, your state phase. Stage 2 is your frequency distribution index. Stage 3 is your phase velocity. That's a simple way of saying how long it is you get caught up and stuck in emotion based on a past imprint. 4 is the dwelling time, and 5 is the stability distribution index. Number 6 is the probability distribution index, and the frequency grouping of attractors is number 7. These are the kind of gravitational bodies and emotional experiences that create blockages and structures and hang-ups in the brain where you lose time. Stage 8 is model state-bound behavior in this theory, and stage 9 map trajectories or connecting attractors. Stage 10 is mode initial conditions. Now keep in mind this is a complex theory, guys, and very few people have the gonads to have created a process to test it. But there have been thousands of people through the years that have been helped with neuroimaging. Mark Evan Furman's invention. You got to dust the fingerprints of consciousness. Okay, and he's talking about the idea that we have a neuroprint, your own personal kind of fingerprint of your thoughts, resistances, and processes. The resulting neuroprint is a static two-dimensional visual representation of phase space that reveals the hidden dynamical relationships that are continuously self-organizing in response to the flow of information through the neurocognitive systems. Guys, this is the ability to map consciousness within your own frame and include yourself in to the problem of consciousness. You can't separate yourself from what's being observed. Phase space is a way of visually representing the dynamics of the neurocognitive systems over time. A dynamical system consists of two parts. One, the state is a snapshot of the system at any given time. Guys, this is really important because remember, nothing is static, and when you stop to observe it, you have to realize that you're interrupting the flow, and by the time, it's like the fastest gun in the West. Want to see it again? By the time you stop to measure something, it's already over. In fact, by the time I'm speaking my words and it reaches your ears, I've moved on to the next thought. So number 2 is the dynamics are a set of rules which apply a state or trajectory over time. The state vector is a point in phase space that represents the state of the system at any given moment. The neuroprint can be thought of as a dynamical fingerprint of the neurocognitive bioarchitecture that changes in response to experience. And guys, without an understanding of neuroplasticity, and I talked to Mark Evan Furman on the phone about this, neuroplasticity is something he's spending a lot of time with because we didn't even know it existed. Now we have an understanding that the brain is far more plastic than we ever imagined and that things move around. A neuroprint has to include your experience. This is key. You must include your experience and your own emotional disposition into the problem. Otherwise it remains a problem. Nothing is truly objective. This is the problem with the Boseman particle and the Higgs particle, and even my friends in the physics department understand that the observer is affecting the observed. The question is how and why, and how do we include ourselves into that kind of primordial soup, which is the quantum subscale. And again, the brain is involved. We are not separate from that challenge. It's all connected. No two neuroprints have ever been found that are alike in all of Mark's work. Okay, so he actually includes the state phases, and the state phases include everything from boredom to disappointment to feeling trapped, torn, escape, happiness, and the state phases include the emotions that might be experienced. Okay, so he includes those when you attend a workshop. He includes those state phases: boredom, excitement, reveals the frequency distribution of those index states. The Neuro-print stage 3 is your phase velocity. It includes the state phases and the actual time that it takes. Biophysical patterns are most quickly and easily reactivated that have the highest phase velocity, 1 second. Phase velocity is measured in the number of seconds needed to replicate state phase. Now what I'm going to say to this, folks, is that remember, emotions are believed to have developed in order to help us deal heuristically means with choices, as quickly as possible without having to rationalize. And that's why emotions seem to trump logical reasoning in most processes. Okay, that's a very important thing to recognize, that our emotions existed for us to make split decisions in the shortest amount of time. And that's why he includes the stopwatch, because he has a very advanced understanding of how that works. Stage 4 reveals your 4-dimensional attractor landscape by yielding a picture of the length of time of each phase attractor. Okay, so again, we're just giving you a general overview here, okay, so that you understand how it all works. Number 6 is the probability distribution index. Okay, so you can actually it actually has a formula, F times D divided by V equals P. Okay, and it's going to help you, once you have calculated your block points, it's going to help you find out what's going on for you and get rid of those things so that you stop losing what he calls in escaping the mind prison, your trapdoors. And again, you can begin to intuit these things without calculating these exact numbers, but you do have emotional trapdoors that come up all the time where the floor just drops out from under you. And sourcing those neuroplastic influences, is the most spiritual thing there is. Because there's not, spirituality is just another way to talk about things that we don't fully understand and we haven't calculated and mapped out. Okay, so here's how he's showing you. When we consider the stability index and phase velocity together, that's the velocity of a trauma or the velocity of a challenge. The index allows you to predict the phase path of the state that you're in. That's your emotions, your feelings, how are you feeling, and the resulting flow of consciousness awareness through the neurocognitive attractor landscape. When the neurocognitive system repeatedly tends towards a particular functional organization or pattern in phase space, this pattern is called an attractor. Frequency grouping of attractors are diagramming the emotional and physiological state phase in a phase space. You can see here he's used clustering technology. It's similar clustering technology we use for keyword research and analyzing the emotional states of the internet when we scrape the web at themezoom.com. It's on the technical side of things. States and phases with higher frequency index are grouped towards the center of the page, and those with a lower index toward the perimeter, since the number of approach and escape trajectories drawn in later stages will correspond with frequencies of activation. The relative size of the circle is determined by the stability index. I like that he calls it the stability index because it has to do with where are we hanging out in certain emotional phase states. Okay, these are fancy neurocognitive ways of describing where do you feel pain, and where are you hung up, and where are you not able to break through, and where are your trap doors dropping out from underneath you, and then you falling. You're just falling like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure down this rabbit hole, and you don't know where it came from, or what created it, or how it's nested with your other emotions, and which actions and behaviors are coming from that. Okay? Behavior attractors are drawn inside of the state phases in which they occur, since all behaviors, learning, memories, and decisions appear to be state phase dependent. This is cool stuff, guys. This is the same clustering technology we use in our word processing analysis at ThemeZoom. This is you. This is emotion. These are universal principles that work. And when you start looking at how contentment and what phases fit inside in those major phase states, you start beginning to understand what things you need to do, what actions you need to take, and what trapdoors you need to not merely avoid, but just simply get rid of in the neuroplastic processes of the brain. And if you're more spiritually inclined, you can separate those out and talk to them about emotions, thoughts, and feelings. Okay, and these are very important because they are all included in. Transcendence is not about a split universe, guys, where the brain and the mind and the heart is somehow separate only in the soup. That doesn't make sense. All of it is a part of the miraculous pattern of the ebb and the flow of neuroprocessing in the brain and the neuroplastic nature and even the mathematical algorithms that make this a miraculous machine we call the brain. are found in patterns throughout nature at every level of existence. What's exciting is the ability to define the basin of attraction for each state phase in the neurocognitive landscape will help you begin to transcend, or at least heal, create new patterns, and move around blockages, and even get rid of trapdoors and blocks. The lines are followed in directions of the arrows, a sense that can be gained of what transition choices are available to the state vector. In other words, you can choose again. You can make a new choice about an emotion or a thought or a pattern. And that's not anything different that's being talked about in any of the mystical texts throughout the world. Choose again. Okay, understand the difference between making choices that are going to drop you down a rabbit hole. Okay, and these are the new phase state changes. So here's an advanced patterning behavior fingerprint of someone's. We don't know whose it is. Identify initial conditions. It's like a fingerprint. External stimuli and internal thoughts influencing transitions into each phase state attractor. Okay, here's the cause, the external cause, break a glass, see dirt, hear accident, and here's the external stimuli and internal thought influences that affect your state and your phase attractors. And see, it is complex. Now, one problem, one solution. One of my spiritual teachers while he was alive constantly emphasized that, and he's not wrong. In the ultimate sense, if you get to the root of all these phase states and these stimuli, you can have a transcendent experience or a single decision that literally trumps them all. And I call that mastery. But when you begin to understand the complexity of the ordinary human experience, you know that behaviors, thoughts, emotions, and stimuli can be thought of as dynamic, spatio-temporal patterns of informed matter and energy that continuously shape conscious awareness. So when you're reading a neuroprint in the Mark Evan Furman School of Thought, visualizing neurocognitive dynamics in 4 dimensions, space-time, you have to imagine your state vector. What state of consciousness are you in? And you have to visualize neurocognitive dynamics in 4 dimensions. This would be a side profile of the kind of trapdoors. I like to look at this specific dynamic as the trapdoors that you fall into. When you go onto Facebook and you've lost yourself for 5 weeks and you or 5 hours, and you've gone into Facebook feeling really, really good, as an example of moving into somebody else's phase, external environment, a context which you do not own, and you start getting involved in other people's drama, and suddenly the floor drops out from under you. This is about the states of how you've chosen your friends. And this is the phase path you've chosen in your actions during the day. Or it can be that your kid is screaming, or you get cut off by somebody on the freeway. Deep, stable, attractor-resistant perturbation, your state vector. These are the attractor landscapes and how you deal with problems. Okay? Can you make it, or do you get trapped in exhaustion and anger? You see, you can literally, within that velocity, start to get stuck in certain patterns like trapdoors. And all of us have them, but they're different for all of us. Okay. So the significant findings in Mark's work is that frequency, dwelling time, and phase velocity are reliable measures of relative state phase stability in a neurocognitive system. Okay, what that means is relative state phase stability and how long are you going to dwell on the problem. It's quite simple, isn't it? Frequency, dwelling time, and phase velocity are reliable predictors of the probability that you're going to get stuck. In other words, dwelling time and phase velocity are reliable predictors of the probability of phase transition given a set of initial conditions. Intensity or magnitude of state phase is not a reliable measure of stability or predictor of phase transition probability. In other words, the intensity of the state phase is not what you should use to measure and cannot be used as a predictor whether or not you're going to transition out of the problem or you're going to make the right choice. In other words, biofeedback is an incredible way to understand that, hey, you can make another choice. Just the inclusion of a meta mirror to the problem, the ability that you have, just knowing that you have another choice, can profoundly affect the phase state that you can transition out of. So correlation between attractor basin and frequency of state phase activation. Attractors with large basins of attraction, large number of approach trajectories, appear to correlate with frequency of state phase activation for that attractor. As the numbers approach trajectory grows, frequency of activation increases proportionally. Okay, and he gets into this more in his course when you have your own neuroprint created. Okay, we'll talk more about that. In other words, you get activated a whole lot more as the trajectory basins occur more frequently. Correlation between dwelling time and frequency of state phase activation. He's got a lot of stuff about that. So on and so forth. Okay. Relationship between perturbation of attractor and phase velocity. Okay. Perturbation is perturbations in your states and how you deal with them. These are all grid relationships. Now, memes wire attractors together, and my company is called Epimemetics, so this is of significant interest to me. Memes appear to assemble in the phase path of neurocognitive systems. Memes literally act physically on your brain, guys. This is why I'm actively dealing with all of them in Sololine, my NPO, nonprofit organization, and my corporate infrastructures, including ThemeZoom and Epimemetics LLC, deal with the actual physical impact of memes on your body. Memes are ideas that are passed through social networks. They're also ideas that are influencing you every day, as well as objects surrounding you in the room that have been replicated via production, manufacturing, and/or conceptual infrastructure. The most effective memes are those that carry the instructions for their own replication and motivate the neurocognitive systems to execute a replication process, for example, a chain letter. Okay, I'm trying to help people. My personal work is to help people using Mark's work and about 10 to 15 other mentors and teachers that have helped me through my life to deprogram yourself from culturally determined mimetic structures that are destructive to your survival and to the survival of your children, as well as to your own, quote, spiritual transcendence, unquote, which is a meme. We need new language and words to describe what we mean by transcendence. And this presentation that you've been looking at is it. It is one of the ways to describe, another way of describing moving beyond those potholes, trapdoors, and emotional implosions that occur when you can't seem to achieve escape velocity and achieve your life dreams. Memes are the reason why you tend to not believe in yourself. Memes physically influence your future neurocognitive dynamic. I'm talking about the physical influence. Memes appear to influence the future. These are ideas, somebody else's ideas, or the way you've been brought up, or your cultural determinism, culturally determined bad ideas about what you can or can't accomplish. They keep you stuck in a phase state. Your conscious subjective experience at any given moment appears to be influenced by the transition probability associated with the various phase paths available. If all this seems brainy, guys, and too intellectual, it's fine. I just want you to know that the whole thing is a pinball machine. You don't have to understand how it all works because you intuit it. Every spiritual teacher that you probably ever studied with is talking about these patterns. We're getting into the science of these patterns. It doesn't require only a guru to release you from this, or some physical magician, some siddha to help you transcend your own physical limitations. That too can become another neurocognitive dynamic trap door that you can get stuck down in for some time if you don't understand the process that's happening. Solar Line is about unleashing the power of your own biofeedback, your own ability to understand what's happening. Mark Evan Furman's work attempts to help you do that. Isolated landscapes and the quality of conscious experience, positive and negative attractor landscapes, this is your environment, can become isolated from each other due to lack of escape trajectories, okay, in not only your environment but your states. Okay, if you don't have an escape, if you fall into a pothole while you're driving down the road and you're suddenly finding yourself in exhaustion, that can be incredibly difficult to escape from. All right, or let's say every time you have something really, really bad, you have to go and sit in front of your guru because they will help you transcend that state. That's not a problem necessarily, but if that's the only way for you to escape certain trajectories, potholes, and negative trapdoors, then you're going to need to do that every time. That might become its own neurocognitive state on its own that you then need to deal with. So the idea is to create balance, to understand your own conditions. Contentment is a particular state, but contentment may not always be what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so this is what we're looking at, is just a visual model of happiness, contentment, because happiness is different than contentment and satisfaction. We know this, okay, because of the different work that Dr. Gregory Burns has done in delineating happiness from satisfaction. There's a huge difference, guys, between happiness and satisfaction. We'll get more into that in the Solar Line work. Pattern entropy dynamics in consciousness experience. Repetitive actuation of a neurocognitive trajectory attractor results in measurable increases in stability and predictability changes in the phase path of the state vector. This in turn results in predictable corresponding changes in the subject's conscious subjective experience. Now, if you can say that 3 times fast, you won't be enlightened. I'm teasing you. These are some scientific phrases that help you, that Mark has created to help the cognitive neuroscience and the cognitive physics departments understand phase state transitions. Okay. Repetitive entropic interruption perturbation of neurocognitive trajectory or attractor results in measurable decreases in stability and predictable changes in phase path of state vectors. This in turn results in predictable corresponding changes in the subject's conscious subjective experience. And our conscious subjective experience, guys, is what escaping the mind prison is all about. Occasional mild perturbations, sometimes referred to as stochastic resonance, can cause a measurable increase in stability in cases where attractors and trajectories are resistant to or recover quickly from perturbation. Guys, all this really means is that when you're perturbed, there's ways to make different choices so that you don't stay stuck in potholes, and that whenever you click that stopwatch, which he uses in his events to find out how long you're stuck and how long it takes you to move on to new and greater and more elevated ideas, can be your choice instead of just choosing to stay stuck. Okay, you got to know that you're stuck in order to transition out of those stuck spots, and you got to understand your reactions to stuckness. Otherwise, you just get stuck in those reactions, and then move out of those states through phase state transition into more elevated states that you actually desire. So this shows how this transition works. It's showing you how a Markov chain, which is a negative feedback loop, can actually occur. And it's those feedback loops, guys, that we know are really how neuroplastic processes are actually occurring. Okay, and this is where you get all kinds of changes in the brain, including the creation of a psychopath, a sociopath. When you have somebody who is in a permanent Markov chain in an unhealthy way, where their dopamine, their DA2 networks are actually wired for pleasure in a painful way, you can get crazy behavior. For example, people who walk into a school in Norway and shoot, 84 school children. This is what's happened recently. Okay, this is a brain state. This is his inability, his logic, his reasoning, his mimetic structure, his culturally determined bad ideas cost 87 lives. Okay, so this is again Mark's way of showing how some of these transition states actually work. And they're not just one transition state happening. They're happening, these processes are very complex. And this is why I like to transition out of Mark Evan Furman's work and the courses that I've taken with him with a one problem, one solution to recognize that if we get to the root, this is what I consider to be spiritual and the core pretense of soul line. If you find the single point of all motivation, you find the single transition out. This is my stuff, not Mark's. When you understand the motivation of what it means to be human, okay, and you can find peace and satisfaction through recognizing that the entire human condition at its root is a phase state. And this is the difference between neurocognitive dynamics and what I call spirituality, and in soul line, what we call transcendence. The ability to align all of your beliefs, hopes, and dreams into a reality so that your Markov chain can be a positive feedback loop instead of a negative one. And it is possible to rewire both the brain and the behavior with what I call a positive Markov chain. And these are theories that I'm putting forward to Mark Evan Furman. Again, this is his old work, but it's really a transcendent work since his physical stroke. He's got new ideas that have transcended what he's developed here. And I would like to thank him for this work. I'm not going to get into any more of it. We've been 30 minutes on this, but this does show you an example of a specific reaction around a problem that someone has. He's having a difficult time spelling a word, and he's got this idea or this meme that spelling is stupid, and he got that meme from somewhere. He thinks he's a bad speller. Okay, so he has all these processes and reactions, and it leads to a sinkhole or a trapdoor called frustration. Using image processing or neuroimaging, he can find a way out by including new emotions and having a phase transition that doesn't have that Markov feedback loop as the final process, and you can change the brain and change the behaviors and the patterns, so that instead of going into his old loop, you can compare with that stimulus, move into curiosity, and get excited and generate momentum. These are what I call dopamine maps, or dopamine enhancers, and it's also what I call the Sisyphus slope effect is a negative Markov feedback loop. Okay, and I've created another Sisyphus slope inversion method for dopamine that deals with these same processes. All right, I think that's enough for this particular video. There's a lot more of Mark Evan Furman's stuff, but I want to summarize this. That the purpose of my work for SoloLine is to include the great and brilliant minds, teachers and masters that I've worked with for the last 20 years. Help you understand that we are in a revolution of consciousness. We are in a revolution of transcendence and grounded inclusion. More important than transcendence is a revolution in integration of all of the ideas to move us into permanent positive feedback states. Dopamine states that are a continual state of elevation, a continual state, even moving into the transformation of value systems themselves, value meme containers. These are the containers that culture holds you bound in. And it's not only to blame culture, but you must accept responsibility for culture as a part of the memes that influence your neurocognitive and conscious experience. Only then can you truly create a virus, a positive feedback loop virus, what I call a mind virus, and only then can we move into the epimimetic transcendent states and the epimimetic integral states of the dopamine, or level 4 motivation in the SoloLine work. My name is Russell Wright. I want to express my gratitude and my hope and even my internal prayers. That is my desire, my deep-hearted and core or root desire for you to move beyond the limits of any environment, to move beyond the limits of any blocks, obstacles, trapdoors, or walls that may be created within your neural matrix, and even beyond, and move beyond the neural matrix itself, that you may escape the mind prison. And the gifts from Mark Evan Furman and many, many other brilliant thinkers of our time will help us lead the way if we put all of our work together in our own transitional motivation. Russell Wright from SoloLine and ThemeZoom.com, signing off.